All right, everybody, we're just about set to get things going for this morning's weather school, and we're really excited about another great topic today. Lots of information to share about a topic I think a lot of folks will be interested in, and this week has been and continues to be Hurricane Week. So let's go ahead and reveal the camera and we'll get things started. I'm 13 News Now meteorologist Craig Moeller. We are streaming live on Facebook as we've been doing for the last 5-6 weeks or so. And we continue to do it every weekday morning, Monday through Friday at 9:15. We try to get things started. These also play back on YouTube, on our 13 News Now YouTube channel. These studios here in Southeast Virginia, but we're broadcasting across the country and around the world on Facebook, and we're so happy you guys are here. So today our lesson is centered around hurricane season. We're talking hurricanes and the season where we look across the Atlantic basin during different times of the year for those hurricanes to develop, and we're going to get into all of this as we go along. Want to start off, though, just getting your general thoughts on the hurricane season. What do you guys think about hurricane season? Now, I know some of you, like my mom, I was seeing she was in here, and some other folks from back in the Midwest, maybe some friends of Peyton's back in Chicago or that area. Maybe you don't think too much, you don't worry too much about the hurricane season. That's okay as well. Maybe some of you are just so easygoing, it's no big deal regardless. But we'd love to know, some folks do get stressed. And if you stress over the hurricane season, especially if you live in some of those areas more vulnerable or more heavily impacted by the hurricanes, certainly get that. Some of you may say, you know what, I just love summer so much, I try not to even worry about it. You know, just take the good with the bad and whatever. You may love summer, and then some of you may like to stay on top of developments. And I got to tell you, me personally, I do love summer. I don't get stressed, but I do stay on top of these developments throughout the tropics. So interested to see what your feedbacks are. Again, love to see what you think. I want to welcome all the kids and the adults as we take a look at this weather lesson this morning. Now, before we jump into the lesson itself, how about a little trivia question, okay? And whenever we talk about hurricane season, I always think of this song, Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season. Do you know which one of these artists wrote and recorded this song? Was it Jimmy Buffett? Was it Kenny Chesney, Eric Clapton, or Paul Simon? One of those artists wrote and recorded Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season. What are your thoughts on that? Let's see if anybody knows that. I wonder if Peyton knows that one. If she doesn't, we got to get her tuned in and listen. All right. So Ray J saying, hey, loving summer. That's all good. Getting some of those feedbacks coming in now. Let's see. Teresa's going A. We've got a B for Kenny Chesney. All right. Tammy, not a bad guess. All right. Heidi and Molly, welcome. Thank you guys for tuning in from Nag's Head. Bonnie's going D. We're seeing a whole bunch of different choices here. Got some more A's and D's coming in. Kenny Chesney, all right. I will tell you guys the answer to this one, the person that wrote it and first recorded it, that was Jimmy Buffett. So any parrot heads out there would know that one right away, right? Jimmy Buffett does a lot of songs about the tropics and the islands and boats, beaches, ballads, and bars, the whole thing. All right, Jimmy Buffett loves it. But he did record a later release, and Kenny Chesney teamed up with him a little bit. So that one might have thrown you off, but the original singer-songwriter was Jimmy Buffett. There's a picture of old Jimmy up on stage. All right, so let's talk about the hurricane season, and we talked about what it takes to bring all of this together, all right? You need these ingredients. You need warm ocean water, you need a low-level disturbance, a low-level spin, you need lots of moist air throughout the atmosphere all the way up, and you need light winds aloft to allow these systems to really grow and intensify, and then you get the hurricanes developing and they get these powerful storms. So the question here is, when is the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season? Okay, you think about this. Our hurricane season, you know it's typically the warmer months. It continues into the fall. But what do you think the peak dates are for the Atlantic hurricane season? Do you think it's August 20th and 21st, September 3rd and 4th, September 10th and 11th, or September 23rd and 24th? Peak activity. I'll give you guys a chance to guess this one, and then we're going to get into the season, when it peaks, when it ends, when we look for different parts of the Atlantic Basin to produce these hurricanes. Quick guesses out there. I'm going to reveal. I see some of the answers coming in. Seeing a guess at C, a guess at A. I think Tammy put out a crying emoji because Tammy missed that last trip. It's been a tough day for Tammy with our trivia, but I'm glad you're playing. I'm glad you're moving along. All right, the answer to this one, September 10th and 11th. So if you guess C, you're correct. All right, so this is the right answer here. And when we take a look at the Atlantic hurricane season, here it is. You can see the activity. This is the red graph shows tropical storms and hurricanes. The yellow shows hurricanes. And this is over the past they started this back in the 30s is when they started to do this climatologically. But at any rate, this is the general graph of activity, and you can see that peak occurs right around September 10th. All right, we get some activity early. We get it really ramping up through August, September, October, and then it starts to wind down as we finish out. But here's what I want you to see. There is some activity here, and there's some activity here, so we can have some hurricane development outside of your traditional hurricane season. Officially, the season begins June 1 and it runs through November 30th. That's where the vast majority of our hurricanes and tropical systems develop in these months. Again, the peak, September 10th. But tropical systems do develop outside of hurricane season. And in fact, did you know May is the most active month of off-season tropical development? So you've got June 1 through November 30th, and you look at all the other months outside, and May is when we get the most development outside of our traditional hurricane season. Okay, there have been 52 recorded May storms. Those are tropical storms and hurricanes since 1771. So, you know, you don't get them as much as you get them during hurricane season, but you can still get tropical storms and hurricanes. And here we are finishing up April as we're recording this weather school. We're almost into May. We're already watching the tropics here at 13 News Now. So you really need to stay alert all the time. Take a look at some of these recent off-season hurricanes. These are, again, occurring outside of your traditional June 1 to November 30 dates. Okay, back in 2016, we had a January hurricane, Alex. There was Epsilon back in 2005. 2005 was such a busy hurricane season that we ran through all the names that they had set up for that season, and we got into the Greek alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. Five Greek named or Greek letter named storms after the entire list from the hurricane season was used up. So very, very active season there. That was a December storm in 2005. 2001, Olga, there was Nicole back in 1998. So all of these storms, these December, January hurricanes happened in the time that I started working here at 13 News back in 1997. I've seen all of these things. You can see this one back in 1984, Lily, that was the previous one. So that one was a while ago. All right. So we've got this active hurricane month, May. We talked about that. You can see those off-season hurricanes. Let's talk about when we typically find the named storms. So this is a percentage of named storms in each month. So in June, 6% of our named storms occur in June, 8% in July. So we do get some activity, but you see what happens. August, September, October, these are the really busy months. And you'll notice especially August, 27, over a quarter of all of our named tropical storms and hurricanes occur in August, and 34%, a third of them, occur in September. So those are the really, really busy times. It goes down after that. I will tell you, in Hampton Roads, our busiest time tends to be from mid-August through about the third week of September, sometimes that last week of September. And then once we get into October, it gets a lot less threatening for our area. We still do occasionally get some tropical systems, and we get a lot of threats later in the season, but they typically miss us. It's usually most of our activity here in Southeast Virginia, right in here. So that's what we're looking at. Now, we'll take a look at June, okay? Early in the tropical season, where do most of the hurricanes develop? The named systems. Well, you can see in June, we've got the Gulf of Mexico, and this area tends to warm up a little bit earlier. You've got your ocean and your sea surface temperatures, and we're going to talk about all over the Atlantic basin. But this is an area that really heats up pretty quickly. And remember, you need those water temperatures to get up around 80. Okay, and that's where it's starting to feed a lot of energy into the development. Now, storms that develop in here tend to move back towards South Texas, maybe right along the Texas-Mexican border there, and some of them find their way up towards Louisiana. That's one of the breeding grounds. Then we've got in the Western Caribbean, this area here, another area that we tend to watch, and a lot of the weather patterns kind of tend to bring these towards the Yucatan Peninsula. Aside from that, okay, we also take a look back towards the Bahamas, and we can get some development here. Now, keep in mind, this time of year in June, we still have a lot of these systems kind of coming through. We're transitioning to warmer seasons here, but we still can have these late spring systems, cold fronts come through. It's still somewhat active, and a lot of what develops down here tends to recurve, all right, before hitting the southeast U.S. Certainly, they can hit, but that's the way a lot of them roll. Now we're getting into July, and our breeding ground for July, again, you know the Gulf of Mexico is already hot, right? We said it was getting there for June, so this is still a really hot area. Still, some of them come into South Texas, but now we're starting to see more of a threat along the Gulf Coast, that northern Gulf Coast. And once you get a system that develops in the Gulf of Mexico, somebody along that Gulf Coast is going to get it. They don't just wind down typically once they flare up. They come in somewhere. So you can see, again, north coast there along the Gulf. That second area is starting to expand a little bit, the Western Caribbean, and now rather than just kind of bringing it into the Yucatan, you tend to get some more sometimes falling northward or getting drawn up into the Gulf, and then that becomes a whole nother issue. And on top of that, we're starting to see a little more expansion here along the Bahamas. Some of these systems start to come up now. Now we're talking July. We get into this area, back across Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Still some recurve, but this is where we can get into trouble. And we've had some pretty interesting storms here in Hampton Roads. I can tell you we've had some come up through the area like Bonnie, and we had another one come up. There was Danny that came up from the Gulf. Remember how I showed you some of these kind of come into the northern Gulf? We saw one track up right through the area. So historically, we become a lot more open there. All right, now we're getting into August, and take a look at how the breeding ground changes. Gulf of Mexico still open for business. You know that's a hot zone. Okay, so we've got this area very similar to what we saw in July. Okay, we've got this area here, Western Caribbean, again, bringing more stuff up into the Gulf. Now we're looking at this much larger area, and this is where it gets really interesting. This is why we tend to see so many more storms developing during August and into September, because now you've got this whole area where we can get a lot of development. Now, for Hampton Roads right here in Norfolk, you know, if they take these southerly tracks, we're usually in really good shape. Every once in a while you get one that kind of does a crazy loop we need to watch, but once they shoot this way, we're in pretty good shape. A lot of them will come up and kind of follow, just skirting along Hispaniola, coming up through the Bahamas. These are the ones that we need to watch. And if they're a little farther north but tracking towards the southeast, think about like Isabel. Okay, that one coming in this way, that one did a tremendous amount of damage to our area. So we need to really watch this whole area. A lot of them, again, recurving. And once they get in here, we also watch for them to turn back north. A lot of them come into the Outer Banks and impact that area. So obviously August getting really hot. Now I want to talk to you about September, because once we get into late August and into September, we're looking all the way across the Atlantic. And we really are doing that all the time. But this is the time of the year where it gets a lot more interesting. And we look across the Atlantic for waves coming off the African coast, and we have the Cape Verde Islands down here, okay? You've got this high pressure, what we call the Bermuda High, and it elongates, stretches out, and it kind of provides kind of steering currents. So you get these storms that come off the African coast, and they track to the east. Now, sometimes, all right, if the Bermuda High is weak, the storm can actually kind of be steered up. There's nothing to really push it and drive it this much farther. So sometimes it kind of comes up to the north, just around the western side of that high. There's Bermuda right there. They can be sometimes hit with these systems, but that's one of the possible ways that this goes. Then you get into a situation where that high is a little more dominant across the Atlantic, okay? And in this case, a stronger Bermuda high may steer it more towards the east coast, okay? It provides a bigger threat, obviously, to Bermuda and potentially for the southeast coast. Now, if it's a little bit lower, again, coming in here, that really opens up the southeast. That can be a big problem. When you've got a really strong Bermuda high, it carries it farther south, and it can bring it into the Caribbean, can bring it right over Hispaniola. You think about Puerto Rico, you think about the Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, that whole area, Haiti, this whole region, back up across Cuba. This area really, really vulnerable. So again, this is all during September, and it really depends on how strong that high is, where it's positioned, how active our storm systems are that are moving through across the U.S. Then once you get into October, you've got these warm sea surface temperatures all over the place. Gulf of Mexico, you guessed it, hot. Okay, we tend to see maybe a little more development central and eastern, but you can get it anywhere in the Gulf of Mexico. Back down over the western Caribbean, still a hot spot, but you'll notice how these systems are now turning more. Now we're into October, and what's happening in October? Well, we're getting more frequent pushes of colder air to help steer these hurricanes. So these fronts come in and they tend to pick them up and they tend to recurve them a little bit more. And I think that's a big part of why Norfolk tends to fare better in October. Once we get past September, things generally get a lot better. Sometimes they do come up the coast, and we have to clearly watch this area as well because it's still warm. But with the systems coming in, a lot of them kind of steer up. Sometimes we get some larger areas of low pressure here to the north, and they can actually draw them back up towards the northeast and then back up towards Halifax and St. John's, some of those Canadian provinces. So we watch that as well. But these are the various areas that we watch throughout the hurricane season. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but it's not just as simple as, hurricane season, we could have something pop up just about anywhere. I mean, you could, but there are certain areas where the ingredients all come together, and we take a look at the weather patterns and how things kind of play out, set up from week to week. And this is all stuff that we monitor very, very closely. So we talk about the hurricane season, primarily June 1 through November 30th. But as I showed you, we do get some hurricanes and tropical storms in May, and we can get them December, we can get them into January, we can get them any time of year, really. Much less frequent during those off months, but they do happen. So now that we're in late April, it's time to think about getting your hurricane survival kits together, and you think about what you might need. Survival essentials: water, food, medical, personal documents, and cash. Always good to have on hand. Now, I don't recommend that you have all this stuff right now ready to go. We've got some time, but you want to think about putting together your plan. So these are essential things, and you think about having like at least 3 days worth of water at a gallon per person per day. So if you've got 3 people in your family, 3 days, 3 gallons per person, 3 times 3 is 9. You'd want 9 gallons of water. You want to have 3 days worth of food. You want to have your medical stuff and, again, other documents and cash. You want hygiene and comfort things like blankets, towels, toiletries, first aid, and matches. And then also you want to keep a radio. Of course, you'll have your cell phones. It's funny, we talk about chargers. You want to have your cell phone chargers. You want to make sure when a storm system's actually coming in that you've got your gas tank filled up and you're good to go. So these are all things to think about. Even though it's really early as we get closer to the hurricane season, you want to make sure you get your kit together and you're ready to go. All right, so that's a look at our hurricane seasons, how things break down. Remember, you can find more from us on our social media pages. There's Peyton's contact information. Peyton Domschke has been in the group chatting with y'all and answering some questions. And of course, you can find me at these locations as well. Tomorrow, we're going to talk some more about hurricanes. We've got more great stuff coming up. Excited about this whole week. Again, we're going to get into how we track these things, how we measure the intensity, how that changes, and how we get that information back here. We'll talk about forecasting and how these storms impact our areas, and then we'll look ahead to the 2020 forecast. So that's all coming up this week. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here for this weather school. I hope everybody's staying safe. Hopefully you guys enjoy these updates. We sure enjoy bringing them to you. And like I said, we've got a few more weeks of these coming up. So plan to join us again tomorrow at 9:15. Guys, have a great day.